So I want to ask you a question. We have one big question to ask. What are you willing to do to have the career you deserve? What are you willing to do to have the career you deserve? Now, don't answer it just yet, because you'll probably get it wrong until you've listened to me. Before I get started, a little disclaimer. So this weekend, I did come down with a sinus infection, 2 negative COVID tests. Feel awesome now, but I have a lingering cough. So I figure this is what we're going to do. If I have to cough, because when I get excited and pumped up, sometimes that happens, I'm just going to do down, all right? Don't stand over there, don't stand over there. So first I want to tell you a little bit about how I ended up in seats just like yours. So it was 1995. I was a sophomore at Western Michigan University. And I had just dropped out of my engineering program. I had gotten my first C ever in paper engineering. I also had visited a paper plant, which none of those are located in places like San Diego. And none of them smell as nice as a room like this that has all this coordinated hotel room lotion going on. They smell really bad. And so I was a little bit lost. I was still taking math classes. And my roommate came home from one of her business school classes one day. And she came in and she runs in, she's jacked up. She flies open the room door. She says, "Erin, I found it. I found the career for you." Okay, Amy, whatever. It's high pay, low stress. Okay, listening. And all you have to do is be good at math. And you're the only person I know that's good at math. It's called an actuary. I was so excited. Now, this was 1995. I had no idea what an actuary was, and I couldn't Google it immediately, right? But being the impressionable and excitable and a little bit naive student, 19-year-old that I was, I ran off the next day to the library. I went up to the 4th floor, looked through the Dewey Decimal System, looked for millions of books about actuaries. Except there were none. Except for one thing. There was this pamphlet. I still remember it to this day. 4x6, off-white pamphlet. And all it had in it was the companies that employ actuaries, their locations, and their phone numbers. Remember those days? Millennials, this was like hard stuff. You had to pick up the phone. And I was still kind of a smart cookie because I noticed right away, I noticed one trend when I looked at this book. I still had no idea what an actuary did. But I noticed one thing, that many of these companies were in Hartford, Connecticut, right? And so I set my sights on Hartford, Connecticut, and I actually swindled Aetna into hiring me into their esteemed actuarial student program as an intern, right? And so I set my sights on Hartford. I went out there all excited to become the best dang actuary I could ever be. And you guys are not going to believe what happened next. In just 3 years, I ended up with an ASA and an FSA. Attempted 7 actuarial exams, failed 7 actuarial exams. Not kidding, didn't pass a 1. And now I found myself out in this big city of Hartford at a company as a failure. But don't worry, I'm not a failure. And so I kept going, and I dropped out of that program. I dropped out before they kicked me out, I like to say. And I took on different roles within the company, right? It's a big company, and I took on some big girl jobs that I was highly unqualified to do. And then in 2012, while I was working for one of our subsidiary companies, a company called PayFlex. Anybody heard of PayFlex? And it had recently been acquired, and so I joined the company and got a couple quick promotions, and I was leading a team of about 10 people, 10, 12 people, leading strategy, product, and marketing. Everything was going great until that Friday, I get a text from my boss. Oh, those are the best, right? Can you talk? Now, I was working from home. I was trying to glide into the weekend, right? Like, this is not time for big stuff. But he calls me up and he says, "Erin, this is a little heavy for Friday. I have a question for you. I've decided to leave the company, and I want to know if it's okay to recommend you as our next COO. I paused. I replied, no, thank you. Has anybody else said no thank you? Raise your hand if you said no thank you before. A few hands. A few people are like, this chick is annoying. First 5 minutes, she gets a big job and she says no to it. But stick with me here. How many of you have thought, I could take on that bigger role? I just don't want to compromise to rise. Raise your hand if you can, that feeling, right? You see, I feel like we talk about so many of the same things with women, and there are so many things going against us, don't get me wrong. But I truly believe that one of the biggest reasons that women aren't at the top isn't because they're being held down. It's because we're opting down. And don't hate me yet. Opting down isn't necessarily a bad thing if you're playing the game the way you're playing it today, if you're doing the job the way you see the job. But we spend so much time, and I know this is when I'm not going to make a lot of friends. We spend a lot of time going to conferences. We talk about a lot of nice things like networking and sponsorship and executive presence and lean in. I'm not here to say that's wrong. What I'm here to say is that what we don't talk about enough is that so many women aren't willing to sacrifice for success if it means selling out. Now, I know not all the hands raised. So I want this whole room to be in the same place in what we're talking about here, okay? So maybe you can relate with this. So you went to high school, went to undergraduate, went to high school, grade school, and you did pretty well, right? You got good grades. I'm guessing many of you are top of the class. You're like, pretty good, I'm going to go out and crush it, right? And then you head off to college. Excited, but a little bit nervous, right? And I bet you many of you went to college and thought, I was really good there, but I'm not so sure if I can make it here. And then you went through college and you got through class after class and you got your degree and you're like, hey, I can do this. Like, I am the smart person. I need to go out and conquer the world, right? And then you had to work. And it goes well, right? You get to work, set your bags down, establish yourself, you work your butts off, right? You take on big assignments that you don't really know what you're doing. You maybe even start to get noticed. Maybe you even become a manager. Then all of a sudden, something happens. And for most women, it's this like perfect storm. It's right around the time, too, we're starting families. Something happens. And you get to work, and all of a sudden, props go flying. You start to commit some synergies. If you get it, like tell the person next to you. Right? Forgive me, Father, for I have merged 8 companies in 2 years. And then all of a sudden, you start to get into these deep dives, right? You just want to do your work. We got deep dive meetings, deep dives. And then don't even talk to me about the politics, right? Oh my God, the freaking politics start happening. And then, what do you get caught up? The PowerPoints, right? The PowerPoints and the PowerPoints. This is great for a sinus infection. Keep you guys protected. And all of a sudden, you feel like you're wearing this costume, right? You feel like you're wearing this costume. And it gets heavy. And it gets exhausting, and it feels like you're treading water, and that ambition that you had all along the way, all of a sudden, you start to question yourself. And then it gets worse. It gets worse. Then all of a sudden, you got these freaking things, right? Because this group, we got big problems. Like, the men have these problems, and then you got these things on, right? And then next thing you know, I know what you guys are dealing with, right? What are you guys dealing with here?
Little HIPAA. Oh, that HIPAA action, right? It's supposed to be a fake baby. And you have such big ideas. You see how to get those star ratings where they need to be. You can see the stars, but then you go to do things, and what does it feel like? It feels like the tangled web of Christmas lights. You can't freaking go anywhere. You're stuck in the matrix and all this stuff. And then what do? You circle around. Let's circle around on this. Let's circle around. And then you pivot. And you pivot. That's what we do in COVID. We pivot. And then what happens when you go to lean in? What happens? I heard it. It's pretty hard, right? This is what people don't talk about. It's that all these things that weighed us down. And here's the very worst part of all of it. You know what you do next? You look around. You look around for who's going to help you get out of this. And guess what? Who's the only person that can help you get out of this? You. That's right. So remember I told you I said no thank you, annoyingly, to that job? Well, you can see why I wear pants. And when I thought about it over the weekend, why I didn't want to say yes, it wasn't that I didn't feel like I was smart enough. It wasn't that I didn't feel like I had the network. It wasn't the traditional imposter syndrome. It was that I was worried about having to fit into this club, this sort of mold I was going to have to enter into as an executive, right? And in this club, I feared my ego would grow and my calendar would overflow and my home life would become a shit show. My personality might even start to blow. I didn't want that. But then it hit me. You shouldn't not do something because you hate the way it was done before. Instead, do it your own way. And so I decided that I didn't have to do it the way I'd seen. I didn't have to do it the way I'd seen those men that were on the road all the time. I didn't have to, send on behalf of messages. I didn't have to do it the way you were taught in Brene Brown books. No, I'm just kidding. I love Brene too. I decided that I could actually do it my own way. My Mr. Rogers moment, because I am not doing this and those. And so I said yes on Monday. And I decided I was going to do it my own way. And not only did I do it my own way and have great success, a year later, I became the CEO of that company. And when I became the CEO of that company, I had great success as well. And I realized that I had used one strategy, just one strategy that helped me change the job, that helped me change the game, that helped me have a career without compromise. That's what I'm here to share with you, that strategy. How's that sound? Cool. So here's what we're going to do today. Such a great tee up from the last panelist where we talked about the importance of vulnerability and being yourself. We're going to actually take that a step further. I am going to teach you how authenticity can actually be your secret weapon to success. How to use it purposely. I know our doctor mentioned that. Actively, purposely use authenticity as your secret weapon for success, which is not only going to make your life better, but it's going to make lives of everybody else around you better. So here's how we're going to do that. So first, I'm going to talk about what authenticity isn't. Then I'm going to talk about what it is, really. I'm going to help you reshape your minds around this concept of authenticity. Secondly, I'm going to talk about what I call the 6 principles of strategic authenticity. As ludicrous as it sounds, I've actually put a framework around it, and I promise I'm not a hypocrite. It helps you really, training wheels, to start putting into action a lot of the things you guys just talked about in this last panel. How do you actually purposely, strategically buck the norm and start to do things a little bit differently? Then we're going to do a deep dive without the mask into the first principle, which is humility. So I'm going to talk a little bit so you can really see the depths of each of these principles and how they can be used in practice. And then we're going to talk about the business case, because we always have to talk about the business case, right? The ROI. We're gonna talk about the business case for it, and then I'm gonna give you 3 simple plays. So you're gonna get to pick from 3 very simple plays that I want you to start doing, like as soon as you walk out of this, before you hit the holiday break. You can pick from those, or you can do all 3 if you're an overachiever. All right, how does that sound? Cool, all right.